So people say Africa has been free for about 60 to 70 years now. Why haven't they been able to develop proper systems which would help them grow or help them get rich like other countries, Western or Eastern countries or Gulf countries? There are a number of reasons, but these are the best, or these are the major ones which are inhibiting Africa or restricting Africa from growing. The first one is bad leaders or incompetent leaders. These are leaders who do not actually know anything about the role which they are in, so they cannot effectively do anything to help the people or to help the industries which are in their countries. The I would also say incompetent leaders. Forgive me, the nose is itching. Incompetent leaders, or leaders who are aligned with Western powers, leaders whose existence or whose power comes from Western backed militias. So these leaders will do anything necessary to keep Western powers Western powers behind them, because their legitimacy comes from these Western powers. They do not have any other legitimacy other than the military power which is backing them from the West. The second thing is lack of investments and education, because Africa is such a new continent, or countries in Africa are new, or they are very little countries which have been around for I would just say 60, 70 years. They do not have the necessary investments to make in infrastructural developments and growth. Most of them lack basic amenities such as food, water, and etc. And this goes back to what I said: bad governments or incompetent leaders, because the leaders are not the leaders are not in a place where they are making rules or laws which will help the people. Certain things like food and shelter and clean drinking water, these are such basic human rights which everybody needs, which the leaders are failing to do, or to failing to provide to the ordinary citizens or the ordinary citizenry. Education is also another thing which we would have to talk about. The leaders are failing to give education. Most of them are even scaling down on education, because they think when they give education to these people would come around and use that same education against them, or to vote against them. Because if they are able to suppress or keep the people in a state where they do not know much, they can have power over them. The third thing is lack of skill and labor. Lack of skill and labor, because these people are not so educated. They lack the skill or the labor, or the professionalism to do things at a skill which would help their country. They can only do things at a local scale. They cannot expand. They do not even have the means to expand to they do not have the means to expand their production or their skills. They do not have any means to improve themselves when it comes to their labor. So they exist in a cycle where they are always left behind. That's what's wrong with Africa. There is a lack of skill, there is a lack of labor, there is a lack of infrastructure. People do not even have the basic amenities or basic necessities of life. That's one of the things wrong with Africa. The leaders are not doing the necessary things which would help the people to develop these basic skills. The fourth thing is lack of proper systems and financial incentives. Because there is a lack of infrastructure, there are no systems which would help the people to develop skills in their workplaces. There is no system to help people acquire the financial aid which is necessary. Most loans across Africa come with high interest which collapse businesses instantly. If you are a business, it's not feasible for you to go and take a loan which has about 15% interest rates. It would collapse you. So in African businesses cannot scale at a point where Western businesses do, because if you are a Western business and you are taking a loan of 1% or 2%, some even take 0.5%, depending on the industry. If you are an African business and you are taking a loan where the interest on that loan is 15%, you do not have the skill to compete with those countries. And as I was saying, infrastructure. These countries have better infrastructure. There is proper road network. Most African countries have really, really terrible road networks. There is electricity, and the grid is always on. Most African countries barely have electricity, and the ones that do have electricity, there is a varying degree of problems which is wrong with their electricity production. There is the water supply, the supply of water, and this all goes back to bad or incompetent leaders. But the people also have the people are also to blame in this scenario. And the fifth and final one is Western and Eastern control of critical resources. People actually do not really think about it. They only think about the West, but there is also Eastern control of critical resources in Africa. An example is China, Japan, and South Korea. These are the basic examples that you would say. China is by far one of the biggest players when it comes to the eastern countries or eastern hemisphere. China is one of the biggest players in Africa. China, in some cases, does not give fair terms towards their deals. China traps African countries in a cycle where they give them things, or they give them loans to build ports, and they come around knowing full well that these African countries cannot provide the necessary capital to pay for that port. Then they come back and take that port for pennies on the dollar, whilst African countries profit very, very less on them. They also have large mining sites or concessions across Africa, as they have large mining sites across Africa where they extract resources and send them out. They are just like the Western countries. So Western and Eastern interference in governance and critical resource mining and extraction. So these are the main things which are actually affecting Africa when it comes to growth and development. So when you hear someone saying, why is Africa not developed even though they have been free for 60 years? These are some of the challenges African countries are facing.